Okay, let's get this party started. Call to order, roll call.
Mr. Arnold? Ms. Banks? Ms. Bell? Mr. Brown?
Present.
Ms. Carter?
Here.
Ms. Clark?
Here.
Ms. Friedman?
Here.
Reverend Gordon?
Here.
Ms. Harding?
Here.
Ms. Howe? Here. Ms. Mendoza-Locke? Mr. Knowles? Mr. O'Connor?
Here.
Ms. Rodriguez?
Here.
Mr. Stengel?
Here.
Major White? Ms. White?
Okay, thank you. Recognition of visitors. Let's start right here in the front.
Latrice Flowers, board staff.
Juanita Helvig Sanchez, board staff.
Amy Wobster, Director of Clinical Operations for TASC of Northwest Ohio.
Paul Lewis Recovery Council, St. Paul Community Center Board of Trustees.
Pam Einstein Anderson.
Shannon Hitch, board staff.
Julie Rudd, board staff.
Great.
Do whatever you want, you're the chair.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, no. I just wanted to take a minute to say thank you to everyone and really just give everyone a round of applause because our levy passed. I'm sure you knew that. I'm super excited. And, the team did an amazing job and really did most of the hard work and carried the load. So thank you guys for everything that you guys put into this. We got to be a part of the fun part and volunteer to be a part of it, but you guys did the hard work. So congratulations, well deserved, and now we get to go to work and help change more lives. So thank you. All right, so our meeting minutes. We're just approving them, right?
Yeah, you just go last.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions about the minutes, additions? So moved.
Second.
Very good. Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Motion passes. All right, Jenny, we want to hear from you about the treasurer's report.
I would love to share the treasurer's report. The financial statements for February, the revenue and expenditures are on page 8 of the packet. It's pretty consistent with what you've seen the last several months. I will note in the local levy revenue that we did receive our second half of year levy allocation at the end of February, and I had budgeted it for March, so that's why you notice the significant budget variance in levy revenue. If you were to look at February and March combined, the amount that we actually received in February was about $75,000 more than we had budgeted. But you'll see those results in our March financial statements. Then moving down to the federal revenue, consistent with what we've been talking about, the largest variance there is our SOS, state opioid and stimulant response. Most of that is just due to the delays in getting up and running. And then in the state revenue, most of that is due to our access to wellness grant. And that one is true underspending at this point. We do expect that to be underspent. We're currently have underspending for that grant at about $400,000. In the expenditures section, in the grant funded program expenses, a majority of that variance, that $2.59 million, is due to the access to wellness and the state opioid and stimulant responses. We do also have some other small variances throughout, such as our health equity planned underspending and some other underspending. In the month of February, we had an increase in net assets of $7.87 million. Then I'm going to flip backwards in your packet and go to the balance sheet on page 7. And really the only significant thing that was flowing through February was the receipt of levy in cash. Increased our cash to $21.9 million. And it brought our non-designated board fund balance to 19.5 million. And there are payments on pages 9 through 11 and a motion on page 6.
All right. Is there a motion to approve?
Question.
Yes.
Any questions?
On state revenue, state revenue remains under budget, mostly due to the access to wellness grant. Could you better define that? It remains under budget, so is that?
Yeah, so they gave us an
Expenditure of revenue or
allocation.
what?
Yeah, so they gave us an allocation amount for the year. So I budgeted that amount evenly throughout the year. And we are not spending according to that. So it's affecting the expenses line and the revenue line. Because we record the revenue as we receive
Both
it,
sides.
as we spend it.
Okay.
So you see it as a variance in the expense section, but you also see it as a variance in the revenue.
Thank you.
Did I hear it correctly that we've already received the levy?
This is our normal, what we were receiving before, yes. Our new levy revenue, for the levy that just passed, we won't be getting for another year from now. Because it's
Okay.
first to be collected in 2025.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Thank you.
And lastly,
Yep.
the net assets
Mhm.
increased.
Yes.
So, again, you better remind that one, please. What is meant by that?
Are you looking at the statement of revenues and
I'm looking at
expenditures
the
still?
first one statement on page 6.
Last bullet point.
That bullet point.
All right there.
Oh, yes, okay, in the revenue and expenditures, yes. So that was just our February, we take our revenues minus expenditures. And we had an increase there because we got levy revenue in. So we had an increase of 7.9.
Okay. Now the
Yep.
influx.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
So just as a reminder, we usually get the bulk of our levy proceeds in 2 large lumps. Once in March and then sometime in August and September. And then there's usually another small amount of state rollback that'll come a month or so after that. So those, when we get those increases, it inflates our undesignated fund balance, but then we spend that down over the next 6 months to get to where our budget forecast will be.
Thank you.
So I know we had a
We had a
first, I don't know if
first.
I
Did we have a
heard a
second?
second.
No, we did not have a second.
Is there a second?
Did not.
And any other questions? All right. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? Motion passes. All right, and I believe we're right back to you, Jenny.
We are. So this is a pretty packed little write-up here, so I'm gonna try to go slow and make sure that I completely explain everything. I first want to echo what Christina said. We really appreciate everyone's hard work and support for our levy passing. It's very, very exciting for us. Obviously, the trustees, the providers, individuals with lived experience, and the Lucas County voters really deserve a thank you. We appreciate that they trust the work that we're doing here. So as a reminder, we passed a new 1 mil levy, and we are allowing our 0.5 mil levy to expire at the end of 2024. The new 1 mil levy, we will begin collecting in 2025. So the first portion of it, the first half that Scott just referred to, we get it in 2 halves, sometime in March and sometime in August. The first half we expect to get in March of 2025 of the new amount. On the new 1 mil levy, we're expecting it to be around $9.1 million. Previously, with our 0.5 mil levy, we were getting somewhere in the $4.5 million range. So we're looking at about a $5.3 million increase net of what we have been collecting versus what we will be collecting. So then I put together a new forecast for you on page 13 that reflects the new levy dollars, and you'll see it in the local levy funds line. So in fiscal year '25, you will see half of that 5.3 million, so about 2.6, because that's what we'll get in March of 2025. Then you'll see that full 5.3 million coming through in fiscal year '26, '27, and '28. Then I'm gonna go through some of the expenses. The only other change from this forecast, this forecast, by the way, is the same forecast you received in February, other than the new levy revenue and the additional expenses related to that. The only other change then that we made was an additional $2 million of expenses beginning in fiscal year '26. So $2 million in fiscal year '26, '27, and '28 related to this. So this forecast reflects everything as it currently is. It does not reflect any decreases in spending. It does not reflect anything related to our 120-day notices. It is everything as we currently are spending right now. It also does not include anything related to what we have noted as our reductions in spending related to our board funds. So we previously told you that we intended to underspend some health equity funds and our strategic planning funds. That is also not reflected in here. In relation to the 120-day notices, we believe some of them are going to be the same. We believe that some of them are probably going to be worked out differently, but we're still in the process with some of that. You'll see that later in the packet. We're still working with the agencies that have appealed their 120-day notices. So that's why they're all left in there at their current funding levels. It also reflects 2% increases for the agencies throughout the forecast period. We did tell you in February that we intended to freeze their allocations at the fiscal year '24 levels. But we had a discussion internally, and we know, based on conversations with the agencies, they came to you in the provider stakeholder forum in January and noted that rising costs were a significant burden for them. And 2% obviously doesn't keep up with inflation. And obviously no increase is definitely not going to help them cover costs. So not providing an increase to the agencies is going to provide a reduction in services. So we are proposing to provide 2% increases to the agencies that are meeting their outcomes and meeting their spending next year. So that is also included in the financial forecast. I'm going to stop there and see if anyone has any questions. Yes?
On page 14, it says TAS of Northwest Ohio. You're not trying to reduce the funding, it's just for evaluation.
That is the next one. That's the next motion. That's the next write-up.
Yeah, you move to the next segment of the agenda.
Which page? Yeah, so I was reading ahead.
Yeah. We'll get to that.
Okay. I'm gonna move on then. Okay, so we did discuss with you, if the levy passed, we had some new initiatives that we wanted to move forward with, including treatment in the jail, increased services for youth, increased services for seniors. We know some of those costs roundabout, conversations with, for treatment and services in the jail. We've had allocations up to $1 million. We don't know what the allocation amounts are going to be for services for youth and seniors. We also do know that a co-responder model is needed. We also know that POS increases, which is our treatment for our treatment providers. I have previously communicated with you that Medicaid rates increased January 1st, and we did not increase our allocations to our agencies. And several of them have communicated with us that by not increasing their rates, they have to decrease the number of people served. Because when you increase the cost, you're gonna get that. So we currently, I mean, if you think about just the cost associated with increasing the rates increased approximately 12% across different, we currently fund $4.5 million in treatment. So if you project that out and give a 12% increase, that's about $500,000. Now, obviously, some of them have a little bit of underspending, so we would right-size that, work through that. And we know, based on the forecast that has been presented, and based on the new initiatives that we want to do, and only having $2 million for new initiatives, we can't possibly fund all of that. Like, our message has to be that we can't do all of it anymore. It has to be a collaboration, and our providers have to know that we're setting our priorities, and that if we are going to fund one thing, we're going to have to let something else go. And as you can see on the financial forecast on the next page, if you look at projected fiscal year 28, our ending fund balance is $11.3 million. At that, we would need to discuss replacement or additional levy funds rather than just a renewal. So this forecast says we're going to keep everything as is, and we're going to increase what we fund by $2 million. And we still would probably be at a place where a renewal wouldn't cut it in fiscal year 28. So we've had numerous conversations internally about what that means for us and where we want to be, because we can't do it all. So we have our priorities set, and our communication has to be, if we're going to take something, if something comes up that is a high priority, we're gonna have to let something go, even if they're meeting outcomes, even if they're doing everything they should be doing, even if the program is fantastic, we're gonna have to evaluate constantly, because in order for us to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, that's what we have to do.
Jenny, a lot of this is driven by the almost zeroing out of the other income line item on the revenue side, which in FY24 is about 3.1 million, and then in 25 is 8.9 million, and then that literally gets zeroed out. Can you explain to everybody why that's the case?
Yeah, that actually is offset completely by expenses in the grant funded programs line, and that is
Okay.
related to Danny's Place and City of Toledo ARPA.
Got it, okay, all right.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that we're here, the reason that you see what you see is because we have costs that exceed the revenue that we bring in. And we haven't made cuts to account for that. So yes, we're bringing in more revenue, and we're going to increase additional expenses some, but it's not gonna be enough if you look at what you currently see here. If that makes sense. I mean, at this point, we're not doing anything drastic. We're not saying we're making massive cuts. That's not it at all. It's just, we're just letting you know this is where we currently stand if we make no changes. But our intention is to start making small changes. We're not going to let it get to that point. I'm sorry, did you have a question? And as another reminder, the new levy funds, we will not receive until March of 2025. So none of our new initiatives are planned until fiscal year 26. And even until that point, I reported to you last month in January that our fund balance was as low as it has been in a very long time. Cash flow is going to be an issue for the next year. We might have to delay payments. We may have to keep track of where things are closer than we have before, because it's been easy for us before to pay up front and get reimbursed later and it not be a big deal. But that's not going to be the case for the next year until the levy funds come in. So we definitely cannot invest in our new investments for the next year. I'm happy to answer any other questions anyone has. There's no motion, it's just for information.
So how many days of cash on hand do you typically have?
We typically try to keep it around 120, but it's very difficult because we have the outliers like Danny's Place and City of Toledo ARPA that are changing our, I mean, they're clearly, as it was pointed out, we have $8.9 million in fiscal year 25 for Danny's Place that is an outlier. And we know we're gonna have expenses coming in very soon that are gonna be $250,000 at any one pop that we have to be able to account for. And our current Minimum fund balance is 8.9 million. Typically, our cash flow is right around our fund balance. And there are times when it's gonna be tight around that.
Okay, wait. So I know what you're talking, I understand the balance, but how many days does that take you?
Well, it depends. I mean, because, so when we get our levy funds, we write on that, the way Scott said. We get our levy funds twice a year and we write on those funds until we get them again.
Okay, I get it.
So we have our fund balance set at 120 days
Okay.
of
Got it.
cash
Okay.
on hand.
Got it.
Expenses and cash, which typically flow together for us because we're pseudo cash basis.
Sure. So there's not a motion. Are there any other questions? Just to clarify, and then I'm assuming that we're gonna come back to this.
Yeah, I mean, I bring a forecast every 6 months anyway, so you'll have another
So at one
forecast.
point, we'll
when-
have to make some
Yep.
decisions.
Yes.
Okay.
What we really want to do is just kind of level set the playground now, all right? We're riding high, we just passed the new levy, people see $9.1 million, forgetting that we were already deficit spending $3 million, and with the expiration of the .5 mil, the net is only about 5.3, so we're already spending $3 million of that. So we have about two and a quarter to realize our new initiatives. $1 million of it we've already designated for, up to $1 million for jail treatment services. So that puts in another 1.2 for the 3 other things that we said we were gonna do. Core responder model, older adults, youth. And those are high priorities for us, right? So now it's a matter of, as Jenny indicated, what are we willing to let go in order to realize our other priorities? That's just the reality of where we're at through this projected 5-year budget cycle.
Any other questions?
When will, though, in looking at this, is there a projected time frame where we're going to, where the team will be putting together some of the cuts that they're suggesting? Or, I mean, it just sounds like somewhere along the line, we're gonna have to, if we're only gonna realize, 2 million, that we're gonna have to, as a board, sit down and really look at all the services, everything that's going on, and make those tough decisions.
So I would say that that continuously happens internally. Where you actually see it is during the 120-day notice process. So the first step is to consider what our recommendations will be for the 120-day notice process moving forward.
Okay.
But also understanding that we do have priorities that will allow us to realize, because we passed the levy, like maintaining capacity and access to treatment, the 2% increase to the POS agencies, right? Cash flow is a whole different matter because we have these outlier reimbursements, remember? So we're gonna have to put out $10 million for Danny's place in order to get the $10 million back, so that'll stress the cash flow. The $2 million in ARPA, same way with City of Toledo. We put that money out first, and we're already kind of thin. So we don't have to take any immediate action right now unless we decide as a collective that we want to fund something that really is outside of our forecast. Now it's a dollar for dollar let-off, right? It's,
Okay.
if we want to fund $1 over here, then we need to think about where we're going to find that $1 over here.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, we just all have, everyone has to realize that we have been deficit spending, all right? And that though we've passed the levy, those resources do not come to us until, during '25. And the net increase to that's about 5 million. That being the case, if you pull back the deficit from that, you pull back the commitments to the jail and to the other priorities,
Yeah.
you're frittering that money away to a point now where you're also saying we're going to increase, add a couple percent what we're doing right now and supporting the programs we do now, which is why Jenny was talking about, this assumes we're not changing anything. And what that assumption does is you can see what it does to the fund balance over that time frame.
Correct.
It takes us from a fund balance of 14 million to one of 11 million. So, we passed a levy, but we didn't get 9 million. We're replacing a half bill with a mill, so we're netting 5 when we were deficit spending, roughly 3. There you go. Sorry.
So it sounds to me like it's our messaging to our community is going to be very important.
Yes.
And we probably should be on the front end of that and starting that message with a thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes.
Because but for you.
Yes. Yes, I mean, the reality is that passing the levy was not just so that we can expand services. The reality is, passing the levy was survival. Plain and simple, it was survival. If we did not pass the levy, we would be making drastic cuts right now.
So I just think we need to get ahead of and get the messaging out there to the community and to the public the same way you're doing now.
Yes.
Agreed.
Okay, any further discussion? We're gonna move ahead. Elijah is gonna talk about the 120-day notice appeals.
Well, good afternoon. This starts at the bottom of page 13 in your packet. Since we have received 5 appeals to the 120-day notices, we've met with 3 of the agencies. 2 we still need to meet with, but in summary, Harbor has appealed for the Community Senior Prevention Program, the Individual Placement Support Program, and the Families and Communities Enhancing Stability, or FACES program. We've met with them and kind of discussed the program and why we issued the 120-day notice. And basically, we issue those for 2 primary reasons. One is for historical underspending, or not missing some key metrics, or missing some key metrics. The Community Senior Prevention Program has had some issues reaching the target population. However, they are proposing some enhanced options for that program to meet additional senior needs or older adult needs. And the Families and Community Enhancing Stability has some underspending, but they are now fully staffed. So board staff are recommending that we return their funding back to the fiscal year 2024 level. And then the ISP program has just underspent, and due to it not being a priority, we're recommending that we reduce their amount by a little under, almost 10,000. So each of these has a motion. I don't know how you want to do those. Do you want me to go through all of them and then do them at the end, or do you want a motion for each? Okay. All right. Then the next program is Task of Northwest Ohio. This is the reentry program. We've known for a couple years that they've struggled with getting into CCNO. However, we issued the 120-day notice as just kind of an official way to communicate what their plans are going into the next fiscal year and how they plan to reach their numbers that we're contracted for. So board staff have been working with them. We've actually been on conversations with them with CCNO, and there is a plan to get back in place and reach that target population. That is a priority for the board. So we're just recommending that we maintain the funding and the number of people to be served. And finally, Learning Club of Toledo received a 120-day notice for not serving the target number of people. However, we realized that with the pandemic and needs for the youth in their program increasing, that we did not have a realistic target number for them. So we are recommending to kind of right-size that target number because we really just historically have tracked the number of youth served, but they made a very clear case that they are also serving the entire family. So obviously that takes more time and effort and resources. So we're just recommending that we right-size the number for that and maintain their funding. So each of those has a motion. Are there any
Before we
questions?
get into the motions, Elijah, what's CCNO?
That is the,
Correction
Correction Center.
thank you.
I just wanted to make sure
I have to Google it every time.
that I knew what it was.
I have a question also. So after you make your recommendations, do you go back and see if they are
There we go.
reaching the target or whatever?
Yes.
How long does that take?
Yeah, so actually, we monitor these programs after fairly closely. We're in at least monthly conversations with them about the progress and how they're implementing their strategies to reach what we've talked about. So the 120-day notice process is just kind of an official process for a lot of this. Board staff are usually well aware of anything coming, like what you might see in the outcomes, because we've been monitoring them throughout the year and having regular meetings with them.
This is great work that you're doing.
So we're gonna take all three of them together. And then we'll go ahead and get a motion. So we just need one motion for all three. Do I need to read them?
No.
Okay. So for all three, if we can get one motion on the table, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Second.
Second, all right. So is there any additional questions?
So this is not to remove funding right now, this is for reevaluation, that's correct?
So there is one that you are voting to remove funding on, and that is the individual placement support program. That shouldn't, from our understanding, that won't affect the target number. They might have a wait list and reduce the amount, but again, that's not one of the priorities. And as Jenny said, we really have to start looking at our priorities and aligning kind of our funding to match those.
Let me just clarify this, because I want to make sure. It will reduce the target number by 5.
Oh, you're right, 5.
From 50 to 45. And just so you understand, we meet with the agencies, we discuss the issues, we hear their proposals, we caucus internally, then we go back to the agencies and make recommendations to them, and then we request that they sign off the proposals or not. In all these cases, the agencies have said, yes, we are fine with what you're proposing.
So there's,
So it's a collaboration.
Yeah.
This is not a surprise to any of them.
No. We would not want them to read this
Yeah, this
in
is
the
the
paper
first time.
when everybody else is reading it.
Well, that's part of the appeal process.
Right.
Yes, how it works.
So let's say this, guys, so if you say, we agree, and let's say they don't agree, they can request a board-to-board meeting. And then that would happen at our next board meeting, where you guys would discuss. At that point, board staff would not be making any additional recommendations. We've already made our recommendation. It would be entirely in your hands at that point. And then if they don't agree with the recommendation you make, the decision you make, they can actually appeal it to the state. And then the state can require some non-binding mediation if they so chose to get involved. But that's the process according to statute.
So technically, each of the 3 agencies has already approved these
They-
proposals, and once we vote, assuming the motion's passed, then their appeals have been resolved. As to these,
Once finally approved at the full board meeting.
right.
That's the second, it's just a second part of that I had. The reason why I was asking that also is, then if one of them has, the reduction in funding, do we want to do that as a separate motion since that one is different than the other two?
No, because it's
still all
the
the
reduction
same.
in motion is carried within the harbor full motion,
Okay,
which.
and that's what I was asking.
Which restores to their original FY funding, 24 funding for 2 of their 3 projects.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Thank you for
We're fine
clarification on
with
that.
that.
So just for clarity's sake, the motions are approving for the next fiscal year allocation.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, so any other questions? We have a motion and a second on the table. All right, let's vote. Those in favor? Those against? Those abstaining? Motion passes. All right, let's move on to the next thing. We're going to number 8, back to Jenny.
I have preliminary allocations for fiscal year 25 on page 16. These are just preliminary, so nothing has been finalized other than what you just approved for Harbor Task and Learning Club. So we will take the final, we'll bring it to you likely in May, and we will also have our board-directed allocations and our administrative budget at that time. So you will see the agency there, the program, the fiscal year 24 allocation, which is their current allocation, and then the preliminary recommendation for next fiscal year, and then we have notes there. So as we talked about, if it has a 120-day notice, there's a comment there for the amount that we proposed in the 120-day notice process. If they get state opioid and stimulant response funds, that is noted there as well. And then, as I mentioned earlier, previously we had conversation with you about not providing 2% increases to our agency grant-funded programs in fiscal year 25, but we do have in here a proposal to include them. We have it in here for all of the programs in fiscal year 25, but we don't have budgets and discussions with them yet, so right now it's still preliminary, and then when you get the final in May, some may have 2% increases, some may not have 2% increases. As of right now, they're in there with 2% increases, but that is subject to change. And then I also want to note on NPI's PATH match, that is a 1/3 match amount for the Ohio Mott's PATH grant. So that's why you'll notice that higher than a 2% increase. And I can answer any questions that anyone has on this.
I have,
Yes.
just want to get my head around this. So, all of these agencies and the 2% increases and all the services that they're providing, this does not include the jail, youth, and
Correct.
seniors. It
Correct.
does not include any of that.
Correct. This is all currently funded programs.
Got
Yep.
it. Got it.
Okay, so there's no action needed on this one. Are there any other questions for Jenny on that? All right, we're gonna move on, and it looks like Sky's up next.
Yeah, page 19 in your packet, we're looking at the fiscal year 2025 provider agreement approval. As you recall, previously when we discussed this with purchasing plan, board staff were not making any significant recommendations for the fiscal year 25 provider agreement. I'll just recall that excruciating meeting last year about this time where we went almost line by line through the 37 pages with our attorney to make the majority of those changes last year. But as usual and routine, we will send this proposal out to the providers ahead of time and ask them for any suggestions for provider contract language changes. In that process, we received 4 requests for changes. The first was from Unison that suggested we reduce the amount of the fiduciary bond required in section 8.17. I took that request and ran it through the county Department of Risk Management, who subsequently said, no, that's not a good idea. So we are rejecting that request. Also, there was a request from Ohio Guidestone to increase their POS rates an additional 5% above the 12% that they had already received in the effective January 1. Obviously, that is an unbudgeted amount, and we are not recommending consideration of that and did not include that in the language. Harbor suggested that also in section 5.15 be changed to include Harbor's proposed youth crisis stabilization unit. That change was also rejected because that section applies to board-funded stabilization units. We do not fund Harbor stabilization unit. Plus, there was a question regarding if that unit would actually be up and running in fiscal year 25, and now we know that it will not be up and running. In fact, I believe that they're on course to make other arrangements for that space and not have a stabilization unit at all. And then finally, T. Scott Consulting, on behalf of New Concepts, suggested that we change a section of the policy, or section 3.317, be amended to reference the correct policy. We had an outdated policy in there, so we would make that correction. That correction is not a substantial change, so it didn't require a 120-day notice, but it is always advised to reference the correct policy in our contract. So those are the recommended, only that modest change among just fixing a few typos here and there, things like that, but nothing of substance for fiscal year 25. So I included a copy of the changes in the information that I send out. There was also a link. So there is a motion on the middle of page 19 for your consideration. And when approved at the final board meeting, this will be the contract we use for 25.
So moved.
Second. All right, any other questions? All right, vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? Motion passes. All right, looks like we have our renewal designations next.
Yes. So
Officer approval.
at the bottom of page 19 is our health officer designation. We just have 3 renewals this month. This is for a 2-year period. So you can see those at the bottom. And I know I'll just recognize that we haven't provided the demographics in a while. There was, when we brought our system over here, all the links in my Excel file broke. But that's, I don't even know how that happened. But those have been fixed, and so the next time we have some new health officers for you, we will include the demographics.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? All right, Steve.
Good afternoon,
It's all
everyone.
you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I last addressed the board back in January regarding the infrastructure transformation project that's been ongoing. Back then, I discussed and I asked for approval, or the board staff was looking for approval for the purchase of an electronic data interchange platform along with a customer relations management platform. And if it seems like I keep coming to you and asking for things, this should be the last tranche of requests regarding phase 2 of the infrastructure transformation project. I will let everyone know that there are 2 additional phases that will continue to move forward with once this phase is brought to completion. On pages 20 and 21 of your packets are 3 proposed motions for your consideration. These 3 proposed motions are recommendations arrived at over the last 8 months during phase 2 of the board's ITP process, during the discovery process facilitated by Ascend Innovations. The ITP concept began as an outgrowth of the board's 2020 strategic planning efforts, which identified the need for the board to capitalize upon digital technologies to better serve and engage with its community. During the 2023 through 2025 strategic plan, it was identified that executing ITP was one of the 5 strategic goals of the board's plan. The ITP is an outgrowth of these 2 strategic planning efforts, whereby MHRSB will migrate from its current legacy hardware, as Elijah just talked about, broken links in an Excel file, just it's of the technology and our systems have aged out. And this is what I'm bringing forth today is the last three pieces we need to fully implement our transformation. And I'd like to call out several of our board trustees who were instrumental in helping as we worked through the RFP process for phase 2 of this process. It's been a long time coming, and I just thank you to everybody for the patience. The first proposed motion is on page 20 of your packets and addresses the migration of the board's digital data infrastructure and all required training relating to its migration to the cloud, identified during the discovery process conducted by Ascend. The one-time cost of migration and training services is $49,130. Ascend Innovations will pay this as the funds are embedded in the board's approved contract, which was approved well before by our board. However, this contract is over $25,000, therefore board staff are requesting approval for transparency's sake. It's not any additional funding, it's already taken, it was factored in, but it's a substantial amount of funds that are being expended. So for transparency, we wanted to bring it back before the board for your approval. Are there any questions, or would you like me to continue to the next one and we can go back?
Go through them all.
Okay. The second motion on page 21 of your packet is a recommendation to acquire the necessary software platforms and required management service provision support, MSPS, to allow for this successful migration. The 3-year agreement is for $210,060, making the annual cost of these platforms and services $70,020. Approval of the software platforms and MSPS provision contract is the second resolution in your packet. Third motion on page 21 of your packet is a recommendation to acquire the hardware necessary to implement phase 2 of ITP. This hardware will provide the technology needed to ensure that board staff can successfully perform their jobs and will allow staff to better leverage the cloud services, cloud computing, cloud infrastructure, and cloud data centers, which I've listed earlier back in January, 2 of which were approved. All systems to which the board is now transitioning. The 3-year infrastructure hardware lease is $108,000 and at an annual cost of $36,000 per year. Approval of the First American Equipment Finance contract is the third resolution in your packet.
So moved. Second. Any questions?
I think it's appropriate to note, given our previous conversation, that all these funds are currently within the financial forecast.
They're in the forecast already. Yep.
And critical, and nobody notices until it breaks, then everybody notices. We have a motion, any other questions, conversations? All right, so let's vote. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? Those abstaining? Motion passes. All right, and now Scott, Danny's place.
All righty, so, understanding that, you know, the motion regarding the financial forecast, or not the motion, but the information, kind of just sucked all the energy right out of the whole meeting, didn't it? And let's just put that out there, and let's identify that there is some good things that are happening. First, we did pass a levy, and it very strategically will help us continue to fund necessary services over a longer period of time. So let's not go down doom and gloom here, all right? Also, we have gotten over a major hurdle related to Danny's place that was now opening up the opportunity to put shovels in the ground. We have executed a lease with the state for the land. The downstream effects of that is that now that opens up the $6 million in ARPA 1 funds and the $1 million in Ohio Mosque Community Capital Funds. So we need to get those motions ready and have you guys make a motion to accept those funds and then allocate those to Danny's place. Now, there is a little bit of a nuance here, so I want to just make sure everybody's understanding what's going on. First, our current projections for Danny's place is about $11,051,000 to build, all in. It has taken us a little longer to get to shovels in the ground than we had hoped for. That has caused some increases in some of our architectural and engineering, as well as our owner's rep that we'll bring to you next month. But we currently have on the books, with the approval of these next two motions, $10,035,000. So we're roughly $1 million away from realizing our full, full design related to Danny's Place. And that does not account for the current efforts related to the fundraising campaigns that will be kicking off that Senna is leading, or an additional ask that I have at the state level right now for another 1.1 in ARPA funds. And so I am very confident that we will identify these additional 1.1 million over the next 6-8 months. As you look at the resolutions that I have, the ARPA, Ohio Mass ARPA Act Part 1 allocation is actually $6,025,000. If you recall, this money was received with the support of the regional board collaborative. That's the way the money had to be allocated. It had to go to the region. It was $7 million. The region actually allocated $6,025,000 to Lucas County. The $6 million was for the Danny's Place construction project, whatever expenses related to Danny's Place. And then the other $25,000 was for a regional planning activities, primarily around crisis, but how we interact with each other and share resources. If you also recall, Danny's Place is a regional project. Given everything we got going on, I did not want to take on that regional planning effort. So we pushed that energy over to the Adamus Board of Mercer, Van Wert, and Paulding counties. They'll facilitate the regional planning process. So you'll see a motion that reflects those two things. One, $6 million to accept the money to fund Danny's Place activities, and then $25,000 for the regional. The second motion is to accept and allocate the $1 million in Ohio Mass Community Capital Funds to the Danny's Place project, and then of course allowing me to execute the contracts in both the $6 million and the 25 and then the $1 million. This is big because this is the lion's share of what you'll have to allocate right now. We'll have the $330,000 from the City of Toledo ARPA funds that will come back to you for Danny's Place at a later date. And this will allow us to initiate additional fund purchases for longer lead items. Jenny mentioned we have like $250,000 coming down the pike here real quick for switch panels and generator, which is about $250,000 that we have to order now in order to have a year from now. And if we don't purchase some of these things now, that will delay construction or opening.
Right.
Yes.
Would you repeat the 1 million is from?
The 1 million is from the Ohio Mass Community Capital. That is actually the board fund receives, each year we receive Ohio Mass Community Capital, and we usually designate that to different provider organizations within our system. Danny's Place was the highest priority for us, and if you remember, the other project was the Zeph Center Crisis Services. So this is significant movement. It will allow me to sign contracts with Lathrop to get boots on the ground in actually seeing some earth move. We are targeting a groundbreaking ceremony for Danny's Place In early June, we're working with the potential, we're working with the parties to make sure we can get everybody in attendance. That may include the governor, it will definitely include the director of Ohio Mass, and we've already reserved a slot on Congresswoman Capter's schedule because she helped us get the 2 million for
That's right.
NAMI Ohio. So there's a lot of moving parts to all this, but this is a pretty big deal, milestone for Danny's Place. So happy to answer any questions.
So moved. Exciting.
Second.
Any other questions?
Let's do it.
Great job. Exciting. Could have started on with that. All right. All right, those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? And those abstaining?
Well, you gotta have the transparency of having the realization of, you gotta have the real piece first before all
Well,
this.
this is exciting, and
Thank you.
anybody,
Yeah, it's huge.
now that the levy's over, anybody who's interested in helping us fundraise, please feel free to reach out to me. If you don't know how to get a hold of me, just about every member of the team here, the staff here at the board know how to get a hold of me, so please reach out.
Exciting.
So excited.
All right, well, Elijah, take us home.
More excitement, I have another motion.
Oh, we're working today.
I wouldn't be up here if I didn't have a lot to talk about, but this one is exciting. This is the Ohio Mass Landlord Incentive Funds. So Ohio Mass is providing us some funding, $37,000 to help incentivize landlords to take really hard to place people, those with criminal justice backgrounds or mentally ill or have a substance use disorder or being discharged from a hospital. Landlords can get up to $2,000 as an incentive. So that's the key word here. Keep on saying it because it's an incentive. It's just to get them to sign a lease with these people. So it excludes residential class 2 and 3 and recovery housing, but it includes like private landlords, standard tenant things, and some permanent supportive housing. So this motion at the bottom of your page is to accept that, and then also create a pool of funding for Unison Health and Task of Northwest Ohio to access this to provide the incentives to landlords. So yeah.
I have some questions. What are class 2 and 3 housing?
Those are what we commonly refer to as group homes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I thought so, but I wanted to make sure. This is just fantastic. Now, this $2,000 incentive, that doesn't go towards the potential deposit. This is just above and beyond that.
Yes.
I just want, that's fantastic. This is fantastic. So moved.
Second.
Any other comments or questions?
I have a question. This money is from Ohio Mass, and who's responsible for
Oversight.
oversight
Yeah,
and monitoring?
Elijah is.
Yeah. Our staff will be working, actually, Charlotta Slaughters, our manager of housing and clients' rights, she'll be monitoring these programs. Where it's just in alignment with the housing programs they're already doing. So
And there's a process already established that we have to follow.
Okay, and is there some oversight that, or some mechanism that safeguards that landlords aren't being awarded incentives and then 2 months, 3 months down the road, tenants aren't being evicted, displaced? Is there something that, or, you know, some time span that these leases have to remain intact for this incentive to be earned, if you will?
No, the state hasn't provided that kind of requirement. These are standard leases, so, you know, it is literally just to provide an incentive to a landlord to take, rent these, this population of people. Obviously, they'll have to work with their providers and stuff, but it's also really kind of aligned with our housing first model too that we've been, pushing for the last.
No barriers housing.
Yeah, so several years, but, yeah, nothing to that effect, although, both Task and Unison work closely with their clients to try to meet their needs and keep them stable in their housing.
Yeah, and if they have a one-year lease, it's kind of hard for a landlord to get out of that one-year lease. But you know better than I do, because you're in Turbo.
She's like, really? Okay.
Well, I don't, folks, this isn't gonna solve all the problems around housing, but it is gonna give a vulnerable population access to housing and opportunity, right? The key will be, just like with our housing first and no barrier housing philosophy, what kind of support can we wrap around those harder, more acute individuals to get them off the streets and in the housing?
Right.
I guess I would just encourage that somebody, I guess I just more of a pessimist than an optimist, be sensitive to what you see.
If we see a trend where somebody's taking the $2,000 and then booting somebody the next week, that's gonna be something we're gonna wanna take a high note on,
Yeah.
right? And make sure that we don't deal with that.
Just be kind of alert
Right.
to it, that's all.
And this,
There is reporting
yeah.
to be done with this.
Okay.
And this funding is for new landlords, I should specify. It's not for landlords that agencies have really worked with in the past. It's for to kind of expand the pool, hopefully.
Is it a one-time thing, or so what if a landlord has multiple properties and they decide to do that?
So, yeah, the state is kind of flexible with what we mean by new landlord, but if they have a couple properties, they might be able to do it up to about 3 times. It's kind of case-by-case basis.
And it's per tenant?
Mhm.
I think it's a good thing.
Okay. Thank you, Elijah. Are there any other questions for Elijah? All right, we're gonna move to open session.
Did we vote?
Oh, we didn't vote, sorry. I'm so excited about it.
I know,
All
right?
right.
It's like,
We
okay,
got a
let's just do
motion, we got a
this.
second, so, those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? And those abstaining? Motion passes.
Susan, did we get a motion?
I think so, yes. I think we did. Or maybe it was one before. Okay, open session.
Who's gonna go first?
Who's going first?
Richard?
Okay, anyone open session?
Hi, my name is Annie Minton. I am the Behavioral Health Criminal Justice Coordinator at the CJCC, so I'm an employee of the CJCC, but my position is funded by the MHRSB. I just wanted to let all of you know, since the co-responder program came up, we applied a few months ago for a SAMHSA learning collaborative that would lay the foundation for how we're going to put together a co-responder program. We did receive word, I believe last week, that we are accepted for this learning collaborative. So that will include participants from Toledo Police Department, the SAP Center, our 988 Regional Call Center in Lima, our 911 Regional Council of Governments that does 911 operations, and the Thomas Warner Center. So we're also hoping that through that development, we'll also be applying for some grant awards to kind of offset some of the costs for establishing a co-responder program.
Thank you, congratulations.
Congratulations, that's wonderful. Thank you for coming and letting us know that.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
really nice.
I wanted to make mention, it just came out earlier this afternoon, that the One Ohio Foundation grant portal is now open and accepting applications. So if your entities are registered in the portal, that was the information I sent out last month, you are now clear to start making application through the portal. If you're not registered, you can still go back and get registered. There is a time frame that they'll, the One Ohio Foundation will vet your registration to make sure you're in good standing and all that fun stuff. And then you'll be able to go apply. I think there is approximately maybe 30 days or so for you to complete the application and submit it. So, Lucas County, as a reminder, will be having access to $2.4 million to allocate towards the remediation of opioid and the opioid epidemic.
All right, well, if there's nothing else, we're adjourned.
Did you see it?
No.